In September, it was Nicole who quietly filed for divorce. By January 2026, a courtroom made it final. The marriage between Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban was no longer a love story, but a legal record. For years, they stood beneath the glow of red carpets, fingers intertwined, the picture of steady devotion. But at home, two teenage daughters were old enough to watch the headlines unfold in real time. No tearful interviews, no shared statement, just a carefully kept silence, and the quiet unraveling of something that once felt unbreakable. To appreciate the weight of Nicole Kidman's legal filing in 2025, we have to look back at the original wound. There was a young Australian actress with radiant eyes and a hopeful heart, stepping into a world far bigger than she had ever known. When Nicole Kidman met Tom Cruise on the set of Days of Thunder in 1990, Hollywood felt like a living dream. He was already a global phenomenon, controlled, disciplined, untouchable. She was tall, luminous, almost shy beneath the lights. Their chemistry was immediate. Within months, they were married. To the public, it looked like a fairy tale engineered by the studio system itself. Red carpets, private jets, a carefully guarded home life, 2 adopted children, a marriage that seemed sealed behind walls no rumor could penetrate. But fairy tales in Hollywood often come with clauses written in small print. Behind the commanding presence and polished interviews, there were whispers of imbalance, of a young woman slowly disappearing inside a marriage orbiting one of the most powerful men in the industry. Nicole would later admit she felt very young, very sheltered. Her career choices narrowed, her identity blurred into his shadow. Love was real, so was the pressure. Then, in 2001, without warning to the outside world, Tom filed for divorce. The announcement landed like an emotional blow. Nicole has said she was blindsided. 10 years of marriage ended abruptly. The narrative moved quickly, efficiently. He filed, he moved on. The machinery of Hollywood kept turning. And then came the quieter devastation: custody. Primary custody went to Tom. The children remained closely aligned with his world. Nicole, once the center of her family, found herself standing at a distance. A mother separated not by geography alone, but by influence, by power, by forces larger than personal heartbreak. There are moments in a life when loss is not loud. It is not theatrical. It is private. It is the silence of an empty room, the absence of small footsteps, the sudden understanding that love, even when genuine, does not always guarantee safety. After the fracture of 2001, there was silence. For a long time, Nicole Kidman lived carefully. She worked, she rebuilt, she carried her private grief like something fragile but necessary. Hollywood still shimmered around her, but something in her had grown more guarded, less naive, more deliberate. Then, in 2005, at a gala in Los Angeles, honoring Australians in film, she met Keith Urban. Not a studio prince, not a global action titan, a country musician with a raspy voice, a restless past, and a guitar slung low across his shoulder. Their first conversations were almost hesitant. He later admitted he waited months before calling her, unsure if someone like her could possibly be interested in someone like him. But when the call finally came, it lasted for hours. By June 25th, 2006, they were married in Sydney in a candlelit ceremony at Cardinal Soretti Memorial Chapel. The world watched. White roses, soft organ music, a reported guest list filled with industry royalty. It felt intimate and grand at the same time, a second act written with intention rather than impulse. This wasn't the explosive, headline-dominating spectacle of the 90s. It was warmer, more grounded, and yet still dazzling. Two Australians who had conquered America returning home to say, "I do." It felt poetic, redemptive. She once called him the love of my life. He called her his emotional anchor. And then, almost immediately, the test came. Just 4 months after their wedding, Keith entered rehab. The headlines were swift, the scrutiny unforgiving. For Nicole, it must have felt hauntingly familiar, loving a powerful man while the world speculated about control, weakness, relapse. But this time, she did not step back. She flew to him. She stood beside him. She protected him from the noise. Insiders often described her during those months as quietly fierce, a woman determined not to let another marriage collapse under public pressure. In 2008, their first daughter, Sunday Rose, was born in Nashville. In 2010, Faith followed, born via surrogate. Their home life, split between Tennessee and Australia, seemed almost idyllic. Sprawling land, guitars in the living room, children running barefoot through wide southern fields. He would play late-night melodies. She would retreat into scripts and return to the kitchen table. Financially, they were formidable. Award shows, stadium tours, Oscar campaigns, millions earned, properties acquired, careers thriving in parallel. They became, in many ways, a study in dual success, Hollywood prestige and country music royalty under one roof. And perhaps most striking of all, the tenderness. On red carpets, he looked at her like a man still surprised by his own luck. She leaned into him with a softness that felt earned, not performed. After the storm of her first marriage, this love seemed steadier, less blinding, more chosen. For years it worked, or at least it appeared to. And sometimes the most beautiful chapters are the ones we cling to hardest, because somewhere deep inside we fear how easily they can slip away. But love stories do not collapse all at once. They thin out. They cool. They begin to feel one-sided. Those close to the family would later whisper that the distance began long before September. Keith was the one who pulled away first. Longer stretches on the road, studio nights that bled into dawn, conversations that ended in silence. He didn't slam the door. He simply stopped standing inside it. And Nicole stayed. Nicole Kidman had already lived through one public unraveling with Tom Cruise, a marriage where she did not control the ending. This time, those around her say she tried everything before letting go. Counseling, private talks, time apart meant to heal, not divide. She understood what it meant to lose a family. She was not willing to watch another one slip away without a fight. But effort cannot anchor someone who has already chosen to drift. Rumors circled quietly at first that Keith had grown increasingly uncomfortable with her towering success, that certain film roles, intimate, daring, emotionally raw, unsettled him, that jealousy crept in when critics praised her fearlessness on screen. Hollywood prestige beside country superstardom can be combustible. Two powerful identities under one roof can become a competition no one admits out loud. There were murmurs about tension, over money, over image, over who stood taller in the public imagination. Whispers that he resented living in the shadow of an Oscar, that he bristled when her work demanded transformations he could not control. None of it confirmed. All of it repeated often enough to shape perception. From the outside, the narrative hardened. She stood by him in 2006 when he entered rehab just months after their wedding. She absorbed the pressure. She protected his name. And now, years later, It appeared he was the one stepping away. In the aching perspective of their daughters, old enough to observe, young enough to still hope, the shift would have felt even sharper. A mother lingering in the kitchen after arguments, a father increasingly restless, the air heavy with words unsaid. They would have seen who kept trying to hold the rhythm of family dinners, who still reached across the silence. Then came September 2025. The filing did not come from him. It came from her. For those who remembered 2001, it was a reversal almost too poetic to ignore. The woman once left behind was now the one stepping forward, not out of impulse, but exhaustion, not to wound, but to end the slow bleed. And Keith's response was anything but quiet. Days after the filing became public, he walked onto a stage in Pennsylvania without his wedding ring. The crowd noticed immediately. The arena lights felt harsher. During "You'll Think of Me," fans swore he altered a line, sharpening it into something that sounded less like heartbreak and more like accusation. A pointed phrase about unreasonable reasons hung in the air like smoke. He removed the fighter from his setlist entirely, the song once written as a promise to protect and stand by her. Its absence felt deliberate, as if shared history had been edited out in real time. To some in the audience, it was raw honesty. To others, it felt performative, petty, a public airing of private fracture. From the imagined vantage point of their daughters, old enough to stream the concert clips within minutes, the message may have landed differently. Watching a father turn pain into spectacle can feel like a second rupture. Applause is a powerful drug. Validation from strangers can sound louder than accountability at home. Meanwhile, Nicole remained silent. No interviews, no counter-narrative, no lyrical rebuttal, just legal paperwork and a return to work. The contrast was stark. One processing pain under stage lights, the other retreating into privacy, protecting what remained of stability for her children. History had once painted her as the abandoned wife. This time, she refused to be abandoned slowly. The September filing was not dramatic. It was measured, prepared, the culmination of months, perhaps years, of quiet endurance. By January 2026, the courtroom made it official. No dramatic outburst, no public confrontation, just a judge's signature, quietly dissolving nearly 2 decades of shared history between Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban. On paper, it was procedural, division of assets, custody arrangements, structured agreements designed to look balanced and civilized. 2 powerful people with formidable legal teams ensuring that everything appeared orderly. But courtrooms do not measure what children feel. Sunday Rose, 17. Faith, 15. Old enough to understand the language of legal filings. Young enough to still believe family should be permanent. For teenagers, divorce is not just paperwork. It is geography. It is choosing where to sleep on a Tuesday. It is scanning social media and seeing strangers debate which parent was right. It is learning that love can be loyal and still fail. Those close to the family say the girls had seen the strain long before the headline. The tension in passing glances, the way dinner conversations shortened, the way their mother lingered after arguments, gathering emotional fragments no one else wanted to touch. And when the judgment came down, something else became clear. This time, Nicole did not lose her children. There would be shared arrangements, yes, but she remained present, anchored, central. The reversal from 2001 was impossible to ignore. Years ago, she had watched custody shift beyond her reach. Now, she stood steady, not triumphant, not vindictive, simply resolved. There is a quiet dignity in that. In the weeks that followed, Nicole reportedly scaled back appearances. Fewer red carpets, more time in Nashville, school runs, private dinners, protective distance from cameras. She did not weaponize the narrative. She did not offer emotional interviews. She shielded her daughters from becoming talking points. Grief handled privately can be its own form of strength. Meanwhile, clips of concerts continued to circulate, lyrics dissected, gestures analyzed. Every public movement weighed for meaning. But Nicole's silence remained intact, not cold, not calculated, just restrained, as if she understood that healing does not require applause. For Sunday and Faith, the finality must have felt both stabilizing and shattering. The uncertainty was over, the structure was defined. Yet the family they once knew would never return in the same form. Teenage hearts carry divorce differently. There is anger, yes, but there is also protectiveness. Many observers sensed a quiet loyalty forming around their mother, not because she demanded it, but because they witnessed her endurance up close. They saw who tried to mend, who stayed, who absorbed the emotional strain without turning it into spectacle. The court issued its ruling in January, but the deeper verdict, the one that lingers in the hearts of daughters, was shaped long before that signature dried. And perhaps that is the most poignant turn in Nicole's story. Once, she stood in the shadow of a divorce she did not choose, separated from children she loved. Years later, she walked out of another courtroom, still standing beside them, not unbroken, but unbowed. And for a woman who once feared being erased from her own family narrative, that may be the quiet victory that matters most. In the months after the ruling, the noise did not fade around Keith Urban. If anything, it grew sharper. There were fresh rumors, familiar ones, about late-night studio sessions that stretched a little too long, about new names appearing in backstage photos, about an old restlessness returning now that the structure of marriage was gone. Entertainment columns speculated about tension on tour, about strained rehearsals, about a man chasing the roar of the crowd a little harder than before. Some fans defended him passionately, others grew weary. The image of the devoted husband who once wrote "the fighter" as a vow of protection now felt complicated. Public sympathy, once automatic, became divided. His legacy, once anchored in redemption and resilience, began to carry an asterisk, not scandalous, but unsettled. Meanwhile, the contrast was striking. Nicole Kidman did not respond in kind. She returned to work with quiet precision. Film sets, producing credits, carefully chosen appearances, fewer interviews, more substance. Those who saw her at premieres described a composure that felt earned, not brittle, not performative, but calm. There were reports of her spending extended time in Australia, school events attended without entourage, evenings kept deliberately private. If there was heartbreak, it was handled away from spectacle. Peace became her statement. Sunday Rose and Faith grew into their own rhythms during this transition. 17 and 15 are fragile ages, balanced between rebellion and dependence. Insiders noted that both girls remained protective of their mother, often accompanying her quietly rather than stepping into public commentary. They maintained low profiles, resisting the temptation to turn personal pain into social currency. There were small human details that spoke volume. Nicole reportedly ensuring family dinners stayed sacred, even if attendance shifted, encouraging the girls' interests, music, art, academics, without letting them be swallowed by comparison to either parent, shielding them from the harsher corners of online discourse. For teenagers raised in fame, privacy is an endangered species. She fought to preserve it. Keith's legacy may continue to be debated. Talent undeniable, choices scrutinized. But Nicole's chapter feels different. It is no longer about who left or who filed. It is about endurance, about a woman who once lost control of her family narrative and refused to repeat that history. In the end, legacies are not built in courtrooms or concert arenas. They are built in the quiet consistency of who stays steady when everything else shifts. Some love stories don't end with a scream. They end with a signature and a silence. And years from now, when people look back at the marriage between Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, they may remember the red carpets, the music, the headlines. But those who watched closely will remember something else. A woman who had once been left, choosing not to be left again. Two daughters growing up faster than they should have. A man whose talent filled arenas, but whose choices reshaped a home. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of how fragile even the strongest love can be, take a moment. Share your thoughts below. Do you believe some marriages can survive fame? Or does the spotlight always take more than it gives? Subscribe to this channel for more stories that go beyond the headlines. Stories about the quiet sacrifices, the hidden wounds, and the human hearts behind the icons you grew up with. Because sometimes the real story isn't what the cameras captured. It's what happened after the lights went out.